Two gritty crime thrillers, Tokyo Vice and 61st Street, lead up an otherwise pretty eclectic list of TV shows this week to talk about. It is TV news and reviews. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews. Welcome to TV News and Reviews for the week. We've got six pretty interesting shows to discuss. Tokyo Vice over on HBO Max, starring Ansel Elgort, who was just in West Side Story, my favorite movie of last year. You've got 61st Street over on AMC+. You've got a comedy show about some criminals, The Outlaws. You've also got Roar, a feminist-led anthology series, and then a couple of game show, competition show, reality show kind of things that we will save for the end. Come Dance With Me on CBS and Would I Lie to You on the CW. But before we get started, of course, we have to do the news. And before we even do that, I do want to welcome you to Dan Reviews It and remind you, we do TV news and reviews every single week. I pick out the week's hottest shows and watch at least 2 episodes for you, hopefully, if there's time, to give you a nice review and synopsis of those things. But we also talk about the current news in television, and that starts always with the renewals and cancellations. Well, 9 times out of 10 anyway. Sometimes there's something so big we talk about that. But renewals and cancellations, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of these in the coming weeks because May, of course, is the network upfronts. So in the next week or two, we're going to find out about a lot of shows that we haven't learned the fate of yet. But we know of a few right now. So over at CBS, Blue Bloods is continuing on. Season 13 is coming up. Then it gets almost 10 million viewers a week, 9.81 million with the 7 days delayed viewing. And that makes it the 4th watched entertainment show and the 3rd longest running show currently on CBS, too, with NCIS and NCIS Los Angeles being the only ones that have lasted longer so far. But in addition to that, we have a few shows that I have reviewed here on the channel. Single Drunk Female has been renewed for season 2 at Freeform. I liked this one a lot. I believe A- was my grade back when I did it. So I'm glad to see that going strong. Freeform, one of the few basic cable channels left, really, that's doing 18 to 49-year-old focused content in terms of non-reality, scripted original content. Freeform is one of the few, so I'm glad to see that back. Wolf Like Me for season 2 at Peacock. I thought maybe this was just a mini-series of 6 episodes, but apparently the door was open for them to do a second season, and they're doing it. Josh Gad and Isla Fisher star in that. I thought the first season was kind of ho-hum. I actually watched the whole thing because it was only 6 half-hour episodes, so quick to binge. I think I gave it like a C+ or something like that. And then one on Apple TV that I have not seen yet, Pachinko for season 2. It was on my list for a few weeks, and then, I didn't really... It's a foreign show, and I sort of cherry pick those a little bit because there's so many of them that I kind of only pick the ones that are either in Netflix's top 10 or people are talking about or that have stood out in some way. And this seemed interesting in concept. I don't remember now what it was because it was like 2 months ago, but I know I had it on the list, and then eventually I was like, I'm not really going to get to this. But look, it's been renewed for season 2, so maybe this will be one that if there's a week towards the end of the summer that not many new things are coming out, I can catch up on that one for you. And then in terms of series endings, Raising Dion is done at Netflix after 2 seasons. Season 2 was in the top 10 English TV shows on Netflix for a whole month and racked up nearly 3 billion minutes in its first month. But sometimes that is not good enough anymore. Netflix is losing subscribers, so they're looking to trim some of the fat. I have not seen any of season 2, but I watched all of season 1, and it's a pretty enjoyable family superhero show. I forget what my grade was from those first 2 episodes I reviewed, maybe a B or a B+, and I think I would stick with that grade throughout the whole season. It was a pretty solid entry. And then here you go. The Last OG is officially done after the current season has been over now. Season 4 So it's going to be finished. No more new episodes. Season 4 was the first without Tiffany Haddish, but now TBS is one of the other things owned by the Warner Brothers with their recent Discovery merger. And we talked last week about how CNN Plus just, after 3 weeks was over because of that merger. But now, they are really part of this retreat from the basic cable channels to create original content. Like I just said with Freeform, that's one of the few creating 18 to 49 centered concepts or content, I should say. But so the cable network TBS in general, even before this merger, has really cut back on the originals as the development dollars are shifting to streaming. And there's been TBS at one point was certainly for comedy. I mean, their whole thing was very funny, TBS. But you had, Cougar Town and Angie Tribeca and People of Earth, Search Party, My Boys, the one, I forget, he owned a hardware store or something, I forget. But they had a whole slate of comedy originals. And now all they have left really is American Dad, which of course originated on Fox, but it's been on TBS now for probably close to a decade with originals. The 4th season of Miracle Workers is still to come. That's like an anthology that they do a different timeline, I think, every season. I think it's the same people, though, in it. Isn't that the one with Daniel Radcliffe? And then Chad with Nasim Pedrad, which didn't do so well, I thought, from audiences, but critics seem to love it, so they've kept that. But they recently sort of shelved a couple of comedies that they were looking at. Damon Wayans Jr. one called Kill the Orange-Faced Bear, and then TNT, same thing. They had recently dropped a couple that they had almost kind of committed to and put some money into. TNT is left with only Snowpiercer and the upcoming final season of American Kingdom. And that's another one. TNT was like a go-to. TBS was the funny. TNT was the drama of it. I think that's where you had Rizzoli and Isles and Leverage and a lot of that kind of stuff. So whatever, we're now looking towards, obviously, more of the streaming stuff. All right, in casting news, the After Party Season 2 continues to beef up its slate of people, but this time, in addition to some of the ones we've already talked about, Elizabeth Perkins, Zach Woods, a couple of people from the original season are going to be part of this. Sam Richardson and Zoe Chow, who I don't want to spoil what happens with them in Season 1, but they were a part of the murder mystery in the first season. Tiffany Haddish was already set to return as the detective, but as far as I knew, that was going to be the only holdover from Season 1, so it's kind of cool. Sam Richardson, played one of my favorite characters in that first season, so love to see him. There's also a new Pete Davidson show that has been ordered to series at Peacock, produced, of course, by Lorne Michaels. Any SNL person who's currently on that goes to do something else, they have to their show basically needs to be produced by Lorne, Shrill with A.D. Bryant and Schmigadoon with Cecily Strong, etc., etc. But it's going to be called Bupkis, and it's described as a heightened, fictionalized version of Pete Davidson's real life. I personally don't think we need any more fictionalized or heightened versions of him, but all right. It's going to combine grounded storytelling with absurd elements from the unfiltered and completely original worldview for which Pete is known. Look, I like some of the things Pete Davidson does, but I think of the SNL crew, he's one with the least talent right now. So I'm not really excited about that, but whatever. All right, in odds and ends, this was kind of a big news item this last week here. James Corden is leaving The Late Late Show after the next season. That will be his 7th or 8th, I believe, with the network. He's the 4th host of that Late Late Show franchise. So if you don't remember, I was in high school when all of this happened, but the Late Show whatever, but the Late Show night shift wars, it originated with Jay Leno and David Letterman. David Letterman jumped ship from NBC to CBS, which had no current nighttime programming. I think after the news went off, they just aired literally reruns of Magnum PI and stuff like that. They just aired random, maybe a movie of the week kind of thing. But they didn't have an identity in late night. So David Letterman came there in '93, and they did. And then he said, we should have a companion show to, the time slot I used to be in at NBC, the 12:30 show. So they had Tom Snyder come on. Then Craig Kilborn was on after that, which I saw his show live. I never thought he was that funny, but I was in LA and they had free tickets. So, and then Craig Ferguson was the longest running host. He ran 9 years on the Late Late Show, did a fantastic job. He was my favorite of all of them. Although I did like Tom Snyder. James Corden, though, I have mixed feelings about. I've mentioned them in many, many reviews over the years. But he will be leaving the Late Late Show and going on to pursue more acting, I guess, probably doing some more Broadway, etc., maybe going back to England and living there. And then in reboots and spinoffs, we've got two to talk about. One is a done deal and one is just a theory. June Diane Raphael has teased a possible Grace and Frankie spinoff about her character, Brianna. She has been working on it. Netflix has not yet picked it up for anything, but it does apparently exist in script form, at least with one episode completed and sort of a treatment for what a season would look like. So we'll see. But that's from Grace and Frankie, and I would love to see more from that universe. And I love her character, Brianna, too, so that could be fun. And then over on HBO Max, an animated Harley Quinn spinoff, Noonins, is coming. It's a 10-episode adult animated comedy, much like the Harley Quinn show, which is fantastic, by the way. I did finish the first season of that a few months ago, and I loved it. But it revolves around Kite Man and his new squeeze, the Golden Glider, as they moonlight as criminals to support their foolish purchase of Noonins, Gotham's seediest dive bar. And the tagline here is, where everybody knows your name, but not necessarily your secret identity. That's kind of fun. There's a lot of these bar shows coming out lately. Cheers is one of my favorites of all time, but I just reviewed one a few months ago from, I think, the Roku channel about like a Mad Max kind of thing, like apocalypse bar on wheels kind of thing. So whatever. All right, let's get to the review, shall we? That's it for the news. We'll have more next week for that. But let's talk first about Tokyo Vice. So this is on HBO Max, and it's based on a book from 2009 by Jake Adelstein, and it stars Ansel Elgort as this American journalist, Jake Adelstein, who wrote the book, so it's basically his story. But he relocates to Tokyo and has to pass a written exam in Japanese to have the chance at joining the staff of this big Japanese newspaper. And so he succeeds in becoming their first foreign-born journalist and starts at the bottom. But he ends up embroiled in some things that he is seeing that he needs to write about, but it's all sort of very, very secretive in the Japanese world of Yakuza. Some of the other people in this include Ken Watanabe. We've seen him in many, many things. And one of his American counterparts, Rachel Keller, is in this as well. She's an American expatriate living in Tokyo. At a bar. She works as a hostess. That's sort of where they meet. So, look, Michael Mann directed the first episode of this, and he is known for his gritty crime dramas. He started in the 80s with Miami Vice, and then he worked his way into films. He did the Miami Vice reboot with Jamie Foxx, but he's done many, many other things in that universe, and this is sort of his wheelhouse. I wasn't quite hooked by the first episode. This is one where they don't really get into the meat of the story until episode 2, but it is HBO Max, so all episodes are now up if you choose to binge them. There's 8 total. And one thing that kind of blew me away, though, from that first episode, Ansel Elgort, so just saw him in West Side Story, loved it. And him, I'm a little bit hit or miss on. He does some cool things and some things I'm like, I don't really care about that. But one thing I didn't know is that he spoke Japanese. And apparently he did not before this show. He learned how to speak not only so he could get by with the script, but so he could even improvise with some of the other Japanese actors. That, my friends, is commitment. And I like that. I love hearing stories like that. And it definitely makes me like his character a little bit more, because one of the issues of this show is they don't really let us into his private life. It's more about, I want to be a journalist and I got to keep my head down and I'm going to journal for this newspaper. But what are you about, my man? They don't quite hone in on some of that stuff. And really with any of the characters. I mean, that's my biggest issue with this, is that sort of even the side characters, we don't know much about them to care about them yet. Now, look, maybe after 8 episodes we'll get there. But 2 episodes in, I can only care about the plot of this, not so much any of the characters, which is a problem for sure. But luckily, the plot is very riveting. The whole world of the Yakuza is very interesting. We've seen it in many, many movies played out, very popularly. And yeah, it's intense stuff. And obviously, look, it's a fictionalized version of what happened. So, yeah, there's going to be some events that maybe weren't exactly right or whatever. I hear it's getting some online criticism. At least the book is actually that it's based on is getting some criticism online for, this isn't completely true. All right, maybe it's not. But even if some of this stuff is true, it's intense stuff, in this sort of underground universe. So, some good performances here. Ansel Elgort, like I said, is really killing it with this role. And then Ken Watanabe as well. He's always good to see. I don't know what I even know him best from. I guess maybe the Nolan stuff. He was in Inception and Batman Begins. But yeah, the two of them are, a pretty fun pair to watch in here. And this could end up on a lot of people's best of the year list. It's getting great buzz. For me, it's not quite to that level. But come the end of the 8 episodes, we'll see where I am. I would love to just get a little bit more into these characters' psyches and even just sort of their lives outside of the journalistic aspect of it. So for now, though, I give Tokyo Vice a B+. I think there's definitely some room to grow, but really, really good start. Next, we have more kind of a legal drama than a crime thriller, but it definitely lands in both of those categories for sure. It is AMC's 61st Street. And this stars Courtney B. Vance as Franklin Roberts, a lawyer and also father of an accused cop killer named Moses. And he is... Or I'm sorry, he's not the father, but he knows this kid, and there's a lot of stuff going on with him. I've seen at least the first 2. I might have watched the first 3 of this. But Moses Johnson is this promising young kid. He's got a college career ahead of him, but he is swept up in the drug scene of Chicago. And in one of the first scenes in episode 1, he accidentally, it is not on purpose, this cop is chasing him, and the cop slips and basically, dies on the spot. And Moses even tries, to resuscitate him a little bit, but now he is on the run and known as a cop killer. So what are we going to do? Well, bring in strong lawyer Franklin Roberts, who has some things to say, and Anjanou Ellis, who was in King Richard and just got Oscar nominated. She is in this as well. As the Courtney B. Vance character's wife. So, look, there's a lot of good stuff here. Front and center, I would say, is the acting. But as good as the acting is, the story here is just gripping. And you feel for this kid because, yes, obviously he's doing the wrong thing and he's, hustling drugs and everything, but he certainly didn't mean for any of this to happen. And so now he's sort of caught up in this web of all these cops, going after him and what happens next. So I think this for me is a stronger show than Tokyo Vice. I think that's definitely more a straight ahead crime thriller. This is more of, a little bit of both because obviously he's on the run, but without spoilers, at some point we have to turn this into the legal drama of like, okay, what happens next to this kid? What are we going to do with him? And Courtney B. Vance is really shining in that role. So yeah, this for me is among the best dramas I've seen so far this year. It reminds me a little bit of ABC's For Life. That was about a wrongly convicted criminal who becomes a lawyer. Obviously many, many, many differences too, but in terms of a strong black lead, being a lawyer, I think there's a little bit of similarity there as well. This is a gripping show. I leave 61st Street with an A-. Heavily looking forward to seeing what comes next with that one on AMC. All right, The Outlaws is next. This is on Prime Video. It was originally shown on the BBC One. And that's because it is a Stephen Merchant production. Yes, we know Stephen Merchant very well, as being one of the creators of the original UK Office, along with Ricky Gervais, and he played the Dwight-esque character of that original show. But he shows up in so many things in British television. But here is another name you will know from American TV and film. Christopher Walken is in this as well. And the essential plot is there's 7 strangers who have all been forced to do some community service through different things, and we find out during different episodes what exactly got them in there. But also there's some seediness involved, and without giving spoilers, the 7 have to figure out how to band together when some illegal activity goes down. And so this is really listed as a comedy, and it certainly is a comedy, but it's listed as a crime thriller comedy. So this is kind of the week for that. This is sort of the 3rd show in a row with some sort of crime thriller bend to it. But at its core, this is a funny show, and I think it gets that tone pretty right. It definitely gets me in the funny bone. But I do sort of like the crime thriller aspect of it as well. It's definitely intriguing to where it goes from there. So yeah, I don't really know anybody else in the cast, but I think there's a fun kind of camaraderie. And what's nice is they don't really know each other outside of this community service program that they've been forced to attend and help out with. So, it's sort of nice that they're getting to know each other's characters while we are getting to know them. I always sort of like that idea. And Stephen Merchant, look, he always has that kind of British quality to him where like he hardly knows what's going on. And, a lot of the British comedians do that very, very well. And he's one of them. But he's also no dummy, as he writes these characters very, very well. And Christopher Walken, interesting to see him. I can't remember if he's done a TV show yet. I know he's done so many films, but has he done TV? I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you know of one that he's done. But on streaming now, I guess everyone's doing them. But yeah, I think this has potential. My biggest drawback for this is these are hour-long shows, and I don't think they need to be. I ended up watching 2 of these, but, I think if it were a half hour, we could maybe not drag some of them out so much. Or if it was an hour, the way American TV shows are an hour, which means with commercials, it's more like 43, 44 minutes. That would have been, I think, like the perfect zone. But because it's on streaming, it's like a full 58 minutes, hour and 2, something like that. And it's like, I don't think it needs to be. They could have either done half-hour episodes or just trimmed them so they were each about 45. Because by the end of the 2nd episode, I was kind of thinking like, all right, is this really only 2 episodes so far? So it drags a little bit for me, but I like where it's going. I like these characters, intrigued about what's next for them. So I leave the Outlaws with a B-. Next, we have an anthology series called Roar. And this is based on a short story collection from 2018. And this will intrigue some of my viewers, I know. It comes from the creators of Glow over on Netflix, Liz Flahive and Carly Mensch. They created Glow, and they created this as well based on Roar, these short stories. And so each one is a different, because it's an anthology, each one is, about a different woman. And they're all sort of named for, the woman who did this, the woman who XYZ, whatever. And they've got some big names here. Nicole Kidman, Cynthia Erivo, Betty Gilpin, Issa Rae, Alison Brie, of course, there's your Glow connection, Jillian Bell. So a lot of people that we know here. And I'm getting really into the whole anthology thing. On my channel, I started in January of this year a monthly anthology sort of roundup. My buddy Joe and I just take a random anthology episode from whenever, current, old, 80s, 90s, whatever, doesn't matter, 50s, doesn't matter, whatever the number generator comes up with. But because of streaming, there has been a huge upswing in these anthologies in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years. Really, since I started doing these in the fall of 2019, we've had a big upswing. And it's because partially, I think, these big name, A and B list stars want to do something a little bit different without some huge commitment. Apple TV Plus has had a few of them, actually, and this is on Apple as well. But they did that one during the pandemic called Solos, where it was basically just monologues. But it was like, Anne Hathaway did one, and so it's like a lot of people are getting in on this. This is one of the more frustrating ones, though. I will say that. So this is sort of like, they all kind of have a little bit like of a science fiction kind of lean to them, or fantasy, if nothing else. And some of the guys you'll recognize here, too, by the way. Daniel Day Kim from Lost. Simon Baker is in this. But I have issues with the scripting here. First of all, some of these episodes, I watch 3. For an anthology, I always watch at least 3 because, of the nature of it. It's not a through line. Each episode is so dramatically different. And a lot of times they're even written and directed by completely different people and starring different people. So it's like, I want to have a good base for an average sort of grade here. And in all 3 of the ones I watched, I had sort of the same problems. Number 1, they were a little too on the nose with the metaphors. Number 2, they all ended very, very oddly. Sometimes abruptly, sometimes just in a fashion that I didn't think really made sense. So I didn't really like the endings. But what I like about this show, and why I'm going to give it a higher grade than those problems would indicate, is that I found the material fascinating. I thought the ideas contained within, and I won't really talk about any of them because some of them are so plot-based it would give away some things, but I found the concepts completely interesting, and then the performances were great. So it's very frustrating to me that I do have to leave it with a more middling grade because of those issues. I'm teetering between like a C and a C plus here. I guess I will leave it with the benefit of the doubt, because none of them I disliked. Of the 3 I watched, they're all sort of in that C plus kind of a range. But I loved the concepts here, hated parts of the execution. The middle part was great, the beginning and the middle where they sort of explain everything and then we see what's going on. Pretty good stuff. And then the acting was great. But yeah, just those endings, it was just too hard to give it a higher grade than that. And then again, the on the nose mentality of some of the scripts. So I think C plus is where we'll leave the show Roar. But I would love to see more episodes of this. Maybe firm up some of those issues in a season 2 if there was one. All right, let's get to our 2 competition shows here. We usually end with stuff like this. We've got Come Dance With Me, which is a dance reality competition on CBS, and this pairs young dancers with a family member that has supported them in their training, paid for their lessons, and what have you. And then the pair perform dances together for a panel of judges, I should say, and then, moving on to the next round. It's presented by Philip Lawrence, who I am completely unfamiliar with, but he is a producer and songwriter. He's won a ton of Grammy Awards. He's worked most closely with Bruno Mars, but he's done a lot of the Super Bowl halftime shows. Like, he's participated in either producing them or performing in them, like playing instruments or whatever. So good for him. And this was created by, speaking of NCIS, it was created by LL Cool J and Chris O'Donnell. They had sort of, I guess, heard about this concept from some family member, and they sort of took the ball and ran with it. Family member of Chris O'Donnell's, I guess, or a friend or something. So whatever, LL Cool J and Chris O'Donnell obviously have more clout than whatever random guy, so why not? And then the hosts, I really was only familiar with Jenna Dewan from the Step Up movies. The other people, I did not know. They sort of did little bios in the first episode, so we got a little more familiar with them, but I think they're just online stars or something. Dexter Mayfield and Trisha Miranda. So, look, this was okay. I don't love dancing shows, primarily because I can't dance, and I just don't know it all looks good to me because I can't do any of it. So to me, it's like, okay, that looks great. And then the judges are like, well, that was, you should have done X, Y, and Z, and that wasn't that good. Whatever. It's funny though. I do think the judges were sort of whispered to by the producers between the first and the second commercial breaks, because the first two teams that went, it was like 8s and 8.5s all across the board. And then the comments from the judges were like, oh my God, that was so amazing. I can't believe you did that. Positive, positive, positive. I'll give you an 8 out of 10. But then they never said any of the negatives. And then every single person after that in that first episode, 6.5, 7, 6. I don't think anyone got more than maybe one other 8 in the whole first episode. So it's weird to me they didn't quite tweak that, but I picked up on it right away because in my mind I'm like, well, why is it an 8 and not a 10 then? Like, let us know if it was so excellent you can't believe they did it. On this show and on all my reviews, if it's like an A or an A minus, I try to give at least like one negative in there, so it's not like, okay, well, why wasn't it an A plus then? You're saying all these great things, So I try to be a little more cognizant of that. But whatever. I mean, it's nice that these kids can team up with their parents, and it's cute to see. I must admit, I did tear up in one of the packages. They do the classic, reality package where it's like, oh, this person almost died, but then they found dance and then it saved their life, or whatever. They always have some sort of sob story to go with it. And there was some of that here. I think it's laid on a little too thick always, but I did tear up at a couple of the stories, just because it was so cute watching these kids with their parents. I think the youngest kid is like 7 or 8, like they're young, and then it goes up to 16 maybe or something like that. But look, this is a fun show. I'm not saying it's not. But definitely, I feel like it wasn't quite put together before they started filming. Like, I think it needed a little bit of tweaking from the judges' table, evidenced, I think, by that sort of shift that I noticed between the first and second commercial breaks. The judge is fun, though. I like him a lot. What's his name again? Philip Lawrence. Didn't know him before this, but, he was a lot of fun. So, look, this is fine for what it is. If you're into the dance competitions, you'll probably like this a lot. If you like things like America's Got Talent, you'll probably like this a lot because it's got the sob story element. I will leave it with a B. All right, and then finally, Would I Lie to You? This is on the CW, and this is part of their sort of, I don't know what file this would go under, but it's like not one of their dramas that they're known for. It's sort of like filler to give them content, basically. Penn and Teller Fool Us is part of that. I feel like there's a handful of shows. They do the new Whose Line Is It Anyway? This sort of falls in line with all of that. It's more of an entertainment show than anything, and it's a game show. Although I don't think there's any prizes because it's all kind of celebrities that are on. It's just sort of fun to watch. But it's based on a concept from the BBC One that's been on for about 15 years. It first aired in June of 2007. And they've had a lot of different versions of this in different countries over the years. But this version is hosted by Asif Manvi, who used to be a Daily Show correspondent. And so there's two people on either side that are sort of the permanents. Matt Walsh from Veep and many other things. And then a comedian called Sabrina Jalise, who was on a short-lived CBS show called Carol's Second Act. That's the only reason I know her. And they sort of are the heads of their teams. And then they have two other celebrities come join them, and they tell stories. And the other team has to decide whether that is a truth or a lie. And they don't know what is on the card in front of them when they pick it up. Obviously, they've told the producers some truthful stories, but they don't know if any of them are going to be used or if it's going to be a lie story, and then they have to make things up on the spot. This is a blast. I watched, I think, whatever was up on the CW app. I think it was like 3 or 4 episodes, and I binged them all. I watched, the first episode has Bing Bong on it. Who voices Bing Bong in the Pixar world? I forget. Richard Kind. I love him. He's always a ray of sunshine. But it's hilarious watching these people kind of make up stories on the spot. Look, it's not dissimilar to games that Jimmy Fallon and James Corden have played on their shows. But of course, since we know this concept dates back to 2007, they weren't very original with it either. So I'm not really going to take points away because it really is an American version of this game show from overseas. Even though it does, when I first watched it, I was like, well, this is a lot like the Jimmy Fallon one where they have to tell, if something is a truth or a lie. Obviously, somebody in the Fallon show, one of the producers, knows what this Would I Lie to You show is over in England and brought it to Fallon. So, but if you watch Fallon, you know how fun that those segments are to watch. This was a blast. This is one of those shows I wish was on Monday through Friday. Like there's still a small handful of game shows that are on Monday through Friday. 25 Words or Less is still on. There's this one called Funny You Should Ask, which is sort of like Hollywood Squares, where they ask questions and there's comedians on the panel that give like funny answers. But this to me is the most fun of all of them. I had a blast watching this and trying to guess if the stories were true or false. And there's not super A-listers, in the chairs, but some of the Daily Show people are on, so I know them. But it's a little bit like To Tell the Truth over on ABC, which I also like. That's, that goes back to the 50s or 60s, that show. But this was a blast. I'll say that. I leave it, Would I Lie to You, with an A-. Probably my highest rated show on the CW since Crazy Ex-Girlfriend went off the air. But anyway, there you go. So, all right, thank you so much. That will do it for this week. We got the 6 down. Next week, we will have more TV news and reviews for you, and probably the start of some of the network upfront. So I'll have a lot of information, I feel like, in TV news in a week's time. So thanks so much for watching. We'll see everybody next time. Bye.